Senator Barker.
Here.
Senator Hanger.
Here.
Senator Howell. Here. Senator Ruff. Senator Saslaw. Senator Marsden. Here. You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't hear you. Hopefully you can hear me. I could hear Charles though. If
we can hear you. I can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you, sir. Beginning on line 1 of the spreadsheet, the First Amendment request before you today, Senator Peake is requesting $250,000 in the first year for the restoration of funding that was unallotted for repairs to the Holiday 4-H Center. Holiday Lake is a great center in Appomattox, in the middle of the Appomattox Buckingham State Forest, and is, I understand, used as a evacuation facility for public schools in that area. And it was something that we had agreed to last year. On line 2, Mr. Chairman, this is your request for $500,000 to increase international marketing capacity at VDAX's international marketing program. About $140,000 was reduced from this program in FY20, so this would be partially restoring a prior allocation and then supplementing it as well. On line number 3 is the $1.5 million that would be required to fund the Dairy Producer Margin Grain Coverage Premium Assistance Program. I believe that bill passed off the floor on the uncontested block yesterday, and it has the clause. On line number 4, Senator McPike is proposing a regional food resiliency pilot project in Planning District 8 to create an app that would match willing food donors and volunteers with those in need of food assistance. On line number 5, Senator Mason has a companion budget amendment for SB 1312, which is still before the committee. On line number 6, Senator McClellan is requesting an additional $4.75 million for the Virginia Food Access Investment Program and Fund. You might recall its prior name was Closer to the Grocer. Last year, we provided $1 million for the grant fund and a full-time position at VDAX to provide the technical support and contracting with a nonprofit organization for administering the grant fund. And then on lines 7 through 9, you have 3 amendments related to charitable gaming legislation that is before the General Assembly. On line 7 and 8, those 2 bills are before the Finance and Appropriations Committee this week. And Senator McPike's bill on line 9 does not have a fiscal impact. Mr. Chairman, that completes my first portion of this, and I can turn it to Charles if you have no questions on Ag and Forestry.
Thank you so much, Jason. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Okay, Jason, thank you very much. Charles, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say I probably should have said this at the beginning of the meeting, but for the benefit of the public who may be watching remotely, we are going through the member amendments that are posted on LIS. For the benefit of the members, we have organized them in a spreadsheet, but public will be able to find them on LIS. On the spreadsheet, moving to line number 10, there is an amendment from Senator Deeds which would create an overnight camp stabilization fund. The purpose here is to provide $20 million from the general fund that would establish a grant fund specific for overnight summer camps that were forced to close and otherwise weren't able to operate during the pandemic. On the next line, Senator Lucas has an amendment to restore funding for the Governor's Motion Picture Opportunity Fund in the amount of $2 million each year. $2 million in the second year. On line 12, Senator Eben has a language amendment that would direct the Department of Housing and Community Development to collect registration and a registration fee for each owner of a manufactured home park in the Commonwealth. And that would be for the purpose of establishing a Virginia Manufactured Home Park Registry. On the next line, line 13, Senator Lucas has an amendment that would restore $1 million in the second year for the Industrial Revitalization Fund and designate the increase for the removal, renovation, or modernization of port-related buildings and facilities in the cities of Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, Richmond, or Front Royal. Next is an amendment from Senator Edwards, which would direct the Department of Housing and Community Development to create a pilot program within the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, that is the Broadband Implementation Fund. And the goal here would be to limit the awards up to 10% of the total available funds in FY22, to which public broadband authorities would be able to apply without an investment from the private sector. And that was a recommendation from the Broadband Advisory Council. The next amendment is from Senator Edwards. This amendment would enable a broadband authority to, or other public body or nonprofit to be eligible to receive Virginia Telecommunication Initiative funds and also be the broadband service provider. The next line, Senator McDougall has an amendment that would provide $100 million for broadband implementation through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. On the next line, line 17, Senator Marsden has an amendment that would provide an additional $294,000 in the second year, which was intended to provide additional support for the 21 planning district commissions. That equals a $14,000 per year increase, and that is restoring funding that had been included in Chapter 1289 but was unallotted. On line 18, Senator Marsden has an amendment that would establish the Virginia Community Development Financing Institution Fund within the Department of Housing and Community Development, which would be comprised of appropriations and grants from both federal and state sources to provide capital and loans through Virginia-based community development financial institutions with the idea of serving businesses that were primarily negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. These companies may have received grants through Rebuild Virginia, but there's an ongoing need for support as they recover from that, from the pandemic. The next line 19, Senator McPike's amendment provides $2 million in the second year for the Lenawisco and Cumberland Plateau Planning District Commissions. This would be for broadband funding for Title I students and telehealth initiatives. It would be administered by the Virginia Coalfield Economic Development Authority. The next line 20, Senator Lewis also has an amendment that would create the pilot program within the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative to allow public broadband authorities to apply for grants through that program. Senator McClellan has an identical amendment to Senator Marsden's, which creates the Virginia Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. On the next line, Senator Locke has an amendment that would restore $250,000 from the general fund each year that had been unallotted in the Enterprise Zone program. Line 23, this is an amendment by Senator Boysko that's associated with Senate Bill 1228, the Virginia Equal Pay Act, that provides $328,000 in the second year. The next line, Senator McClellan's amendment associated with Senate Bill 1310, the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights bill. The amendment includes $500,000 from the general fund in the first year. The next line 25 on the next page, Senator Eben has a language amendment that, with the funding associated, that would provide $500,000 for the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energies to study the health and environmental impacts of gold mining. The next line, Senator Hanger has a language amendment that would amend the definition of small business to include certain co-ops. And then the next line, Senator Marsden has an amendment that would provide just under $2.5 million to support initiatives identified in the International Trade Plan. Senator Marsden also has an amendment on the next line that provides just under $4.7 million for the Talent Accelerator Program at the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. On the next line, Senator DeSteff has a $10 million amendment in the second year that would provide funding for the Virginia Employment Commission. The next line, Senator Boysko's amendment related to Senate Bill 1330, the Paid Family and Medical Leave Bill. This would authorize a loan to the Virginia Employment Commission from the Commonwealth Treasury to cover startup costs. On the next line, Senator Bell has a $50,000 amendment associated with Senate Bill 1298, which would fund the implementation of tourism improvement districts. As it turns out, that bill has no fiscal impact. On the next line, Senator Ruff has two amendments, actually. On the first line is an additional $1 million in rent and operating support for the Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing. The next line provides $2 million for a working line of credit for the Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing. On the next line, Senator Newman has a budget amendment request for $250,000 that would be used as a planning grant for the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium Authority. On the next line, we would begin the natural resources section, so I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. Otherwise, I can hand control back to Jason.
Thank you, Charles. Are there any questions from subcommittee members? Thank you very much, Charles. Jason, take it away.
Yes, sir. Picking up on line 35, Senator Hanger is requesting an additional $500,000 in the second year for the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program, which provides support to sort of urban horticulturalists and gardeners for implementation of best management practices, bringing that amount from $500,000 to $1 million. On the following line 36, Senator Hanger is requesting $63 million for fully funding the agricultural best management practices needs request. On line 37, Senator Hanger is requesting $170,000 in the second year, which staff would consider to be a technical amendment. Funding for the environmental literacy program had been unallotted, but the language in the budget was not amended to reflect it. Therefore, it would sort of cause the department to have to eat that $170,000. So I view it as technical. On line 38, Senator Marston, this is your request for language directing the creation of invasive species work group. I believe it complements legislation in the House. You have a $50,000 placeholder. I don't believe it would have any cost. On the next line, Senator Bell is requesting a $50,000 placeholder for SB 1280. The bill had no fiscal impact. On the following line, line 40, that is Senator Lewis's request, which is identical to the one I described before related to environmental literacy. On line 41, Senator Lewis put in a placeholder budget amendment request for SB 1389, the flood disclosure website. As it is before the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, the fiscal impact has been removed. On line 42, Senator Ruff is requesting the restoration of $740,000 that was approved in Chapter 1289 and subsequently unallotted for matching approximately $4 million in private funds that have been raised for a riverfront park in Danville. I believe it is located at an old mill facility. On line 43, Senator Servell is requesting $2.8 million for a water supply to Mason Neck State Park. The good news is that that price is probably closer to $1.5 million. And doing the research from the presentation that DCR gave last year, I would note that Mason Neck had a higher visitorship last year than Lake Anna, and it's still on well water. Turning to line 44, Senator Deeds is requesting $5 million in the second year for Biscuit Run Park. You may remember that the Commonwealth has leased that facility to Albemarle County for $1 for a 99-year operating lease. $5 million is supposed to be provided by the Mountain Valley Pipeline program for providing sort of operating support for this park. I'm still trying to figure out the nuances of Senator Deeds' request. On line 45, Senator Pillion is requesting $350,000 for the Mendota Trail Conservancy, which converts an old rail line out in the Abington area to a usable bike ped trail, and it has a unique feature of converting shipping containers. And we have funded a similar grant for that program in the past. On line 46, Senator Bell is requesting the operating funding for, I believe it is called Sweet Run State Park. It is a new one that we accepted in Loudoun County that was kind of turnkey. This would be the operational cost to get it started up and running, so that would be an ongoing cost. On line 47, Senator Pillion is requesting about $1.4 million for restorations of the rhododendron restaurant and lodge at Breaks Interstate Park. Because this is a jointly operated facility, if the General Assembly elects to do this jointly with Kentucky, if the General Assembly does elect to do something here, it has to be in cash and cannot be expensed as a capital project. On line 48, Senator Lewis had a companion amendment for Senate Bill 1352, which I believe has been strucken at the request of the patron. On line 49, Senator Barker, this is your staffing companion amendment for Senate Bill 1207, which has the clause on it, I believe. Senator Edwards on line 50 is requesting $175,000 to conduct a research study to look at the use of certain species of plants in reducing sodium and salt runoff from along the roadside. On line 51, Senator Survell is requesting $500,000 for a groundwater monitoring well in the northern groundwater or in the eastern groundwater management area. On line 52, Senator Peake is requesting language to convene a work group looking at harmful algae blooms in between the Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Quality. There may be similar legislation. Honestly, I've sort of lost track of that one, and we'll do some research on it today if the committee would want to move forward with the concept. On line 53, Senator Marsden, this is your request for the 4 positions that go along with Senate Bill 1207 that is currently before the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee with an enactment clause requiring the funding of 4 positions. On line 54, Senator McClellan has a placeholder amendment for Senate Bill 1311, which I believe, according to the FIS, does not have a fiscal impact. On line 55, Senator Vogel has language requesting a nutrient credit work group, a nutrient credit program work group to really analyze whether or not the nutrient credit program is incentivizing farmers to take their land out of active agricultural production. There also may be a companion piece of legislation on the House. I'm not certain of that as well, but we'll continue to explore that as the day unfolds. On line 56, Senator Lewis has a language amendment related to the TMDL grant program for wastewater treatment plants that would focus on a single nutrient issue, nitrogen or phosphorus, as opposed to the 2 combined, and would provide greater than 50% eligibility for fiscally distressed localities. The budget amendment may be complementary to legislation that is in ACNR today that addresses this issue at the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. I'm unclear as to if this is intended to complement that approach and be drawn to the Stormwater Fund, or if this is indeed supposed to be drawn to the wastewater treatment plant program. Turning to line 57, at the Department of Wildlife Resources, Senator Peake is requesting language requiring an additional law enforcement shift on Lake Anna. I understand the department is in the process of hiring that role. Perhaps they'd be able to do it without the explicit direction. On line 58, Senator Edwards is requesting a 1-year pause in a fee that was approved last year. House Bill 1604 passed the Senate 34-1, and essentially it requires people that use plastic boats to pay the same sort of fee that the people that use fiberglass boats have to pay when they register. So it's a $4 a day use fee, or a $23 annual fee. There is some consternation amongst the recreational boating community over the appropriateness of that fee, but again, it would pause legislation that was adopted last year. Turning to line 59, Senator Peterson has requested the feasibility assessment of converting the Rapidan Wildlife Management Area to a state park. I believe early assessments indicate that the acquisition of that land using federal dollars would make that conversion impossible. Turning to line 60, Senator Eben is requesting $120,000 for the Arlington Historical Society for preservation of the Hume School. On line 61, Senator Survell is requesting the restoration of unallotted funding for underwater archaeology positions at the Department of Historic Resources. On line 62, Senator Eben is requesting $2 million at the Department of Historic Resources for preservation of the river farm, which I believe was the Audubon Society's headquarters, is currently on the market. On line 63, Senator McClellan is requesting $250,000 at the Department of Historic Resources, which is really sort of three complementary actions that provide one whole initiative. It would be a full-time staffer and some IT support to administer a grant program in partnership with Virginia's historically Black colleges and universities to increase the diversity of the properties that are included in the Commonwealth's historical property catalog. And that would be a paid internship program. And of that money, $100,000 would be for the grant program. On line 64, Senator Morrissey is requesting $100,000 for preservation of Hopewell Manor. On line 65, Senator Lucas is requesting the restoration of $139,000 each year for operating support, its base operating support at the Department of Historic Resources, which was unallotted. And that completes natural resources. If there are any questions, I can turn it back over to Charles.
Senator Saslaw.
What was the total value, the total of all these budget amendments that were put in this subcommittee? Just out of curiosity.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Saslaw,
Yeah.
if Charles has it, if you give me time that it takes Charles to finish the rest of this, I can run a total.
I couldn't, you got faded out. What, say that again?
I said, if you'll give me a few minutes to run that total while Charles talks, I'll have it before the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, question for me on Senator Morrissey's line 64.
Yes, sir.
I think it says Hopewell Manor, and then it says improvements to Weston Manor in the explanation box. We'll attribute it at the moment, Senator, to staff confusion, and I apologize, and we'll figure that one out post haste. Okay, thank you. Other questions from the subcommittee? All right. Thank you very much, Jason. Charles, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few more amendments to cover. There are two commerce and trade related amendments in central appropriations. The first is Senator Deed's amendment on line 66, which would provide $100 million from the general fund in the second year. That would be split between $50 million for a one-time supplemental unemployment benefit for certain long-term employed individuals and $50 million to expand the Reemploying Virginians program through the Virginia Community College system. This would have a companion amendment that reduces the deposit to the revenue reserve by $100 million. On the next line is a language amendment from Senator McDougal, which in essence requires that in the governor's introduced budget that he provide general fund appropriations for the promotion and development of broadband infrastructure that is equal to or greater than the recommended appropriations for economic development. The next two are in additional enactments. The first is clarifying language around requirements for landlords and tenants to apply for rental assistance. This is in the section related to evictions moratorium. And then on the last line, Senator Barker has an amendment that would, in essence, require that a Phase 1 utility write-off debt owed in an amount that for customers who were not behind on their bills, and this is basically to provide the same amount of relief for those customers that was provided in Chapter 56 for bad debt that was written off by the same utility. And Mr. Chairman, that completes our summary of the members' budget amendment requests, and if there are any questions.
Thank you, Charles. Just one one question that I have is that compared to previous years, the number of requests we had this year, is it up, down, about the same?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's comparable to prior years.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
And I have had a chance to run the pivot table, Senator Marsden, Mr. Chairman, to Senator Saslaw's question.
Yes.
The biennial request for the Economic Development Natural Resources member amendments is $366.3 million.
There you go, Dick.
Did anybody put in a tax increase to pay for any of this?
We're going to do it on gas stations.
When I got here, and I told Senator Howe, Ed Willie required you to put in a tax increase for every budget amendment you put in, and if you didn't, he threw it in the trash can. As a result, our budget amendments never totaled more than 3 or 4 total across the whole span, and they were his amendments usually. That was it. Quite frankly, we ought to go back to that policy.
I'm not sure about that. I don't want Ed Willie running things again.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Senator Saslaw. And there we have our total. Charles, what do you have next for us?
Mr. Chairman, that will conclude the subcommittee's work, as we will be reporting the budget this coming weekend.
Very good. Thank you so much. If there are no other issues before the subcommittee will rise.